how chasing pleasure is ruining your mental health. Sometimes we wake up and all we want is to feel good. That's it. We scroll through our phones looking for something funny, something shocking, something that gives us that little jolt. We grab coffee not for the taste, but for the hit. We work not to build, but to get through the day so we can finally relax and binge watch our favorite show. And when that show ends, we just want something else to keep the feeling going. But have you ever stopped, really stopped, and asked, what am I chasing? Where is this going? Why does it never feel like enough? Why, even when we're surrounded by pleasure, entertainment, food, dopamine, do we still feel anxious, sad, or even empty? This video isn't just about mental health. It's about a truth we've been avoiding for too long. A truth that philosophers have whispered about for centuries, yet we've drowned it out with noise. The truth is this: pleasure, when pursued as an end in itself, is a trap. And the more we chase it, the more it runs away from us. This isn't just poetic, it's painfully real. I've lived it. You've probably lived it. And I want to show you a way out, not by telling you to abandon all joy, but by helping you understand what joy actually is.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
Let's start with a basic premise. Your brain is wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. That's biology. It helped our ancestors survive. But in the modern world, this ancient wiring is being hacked 24/7. Social media, processed food, porn, hyper-targeted ads, instant delivery, endless entertainment, all of it engineered to give you just enough of a dopamine hit to keep you coming back. You think you're choosing. You're not. You're reacting. You're being played. But here's the twist. The more we flood our brains with easy pleasure, the more our baseline for happiness drops. The little things, birds singing, a good conversation, an afternoon walk, stop registering. They're not enough anymore. And so we need more stimulation, more excitement, more novelty. But it never satisfies. It's like drinking salt water to quench your thirst. For Epicurus, often misunderstood as a hedonist, actually warned against unlimited pleasure seeking. He believed the highest pleasure was tranquility, not indulgence. He said, "If you wish to be rich, do not add to your money, but subtract from your desire." Let that sink in. We're not unhappy because we have too little. We're unhappy because we want too much. And the tragedy? The system we live in depends on us wanting more. More stuff, more likes, more buzz, more everything. Because if we stopped, even for a moment, and said, "I'm okay," the whole machine would crumble. So here's the question I want to ask you. When was the last time you felt real peace? Not excitement, not distraction, but peace. Can you remember? Because if you can't, you're not alone. And that's terrifying. We've mistaken pleasure for happiness. But happiness is not just a feeling, it's a state of alignment. When your actions, your values, and your inner life are in harmony, you feel grounded. You feel strong. You feel real. But chasing pleasure often pulls us out of alignment. Think about it. How often do you do things you know aren't good for you just because they feel good in the moment? Eating junk, staying up late doom scrolling, saying yes to things that drain you. We trade long-term peace for short-term relief. Again and again and again. And then we wonder why we're anxious, why we can't focus, why we feel disconnected even when we're surrounded by stimulation. There's a concept in stoicism called hedonic adaptation. It means we get used to pleasure fast. That new phone? It's exciting for a day. And that vacation? Blissful, but fleeting. That crush? Intoxicating until the novelty wears off. Our brains normalize pleasure. What was once thrilling becomes mundane. So we seek the next high, and then the next, and then the next. But what if the problem isn't that pleasure fades, but that we expect it to last? What if the real issue is that we've forgotten how to appreciate what we have because we're always looking for what's next? Let me ask you this: what would happen if you stopped chasing pleasure for 1 week? Not gave up joy, but became intentional about it? What if you replaced stimulation with stillness, scrolling with solitude, consumption with creation? Would you go crazy, or would you finally hear your own thoughts for the first time in years? Because here's the paradox: the more we chase pleasure, the more we suffer. But when we stop chasing it, when we embrace discomfort, discipline, and depth, pleasure returns. Not the shallow kind, the deep kind. The kind that fills your chest and makes you feel alive. The kind that comes from connection, purpose, growth. And I know what you're thinking, but life is hard enough. Why make it harder? And that's fair. But I'm not saying you should suffer for the sake of suffering. I'm saying that true mental health doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from understanding it, facing it, learning from it. Because pain, when faced, becomes wisdom. And wisdom leads to freedom. So the next time you feel the urge to reach for your phone, or eat that thing you know you don't need, or escape into another episode, pause. Ask yourself, what am I really looking for right now? Is it pleasure? Or is it peace? Is it stimulation? Or is it meaning? Because if you keep chasing pleasure, you may eventually find yourself in a place where nothing excites you anymore, where your mind is noisy, but your soul is silent. And that, my friend, is the real danger. The dopamine deception. Why feeling good is making you feel worse every time you tap a screen. Your brain releases a little splash of dopamine. Not a flood, just a drip. But it's enough to make you feel a bit better, a bit more alive, a bit less bored. And that's the beginning of the trap. Because dopamine isn't inherently bad, it's essential. It's the molecule of motivation, the chemical that says, do that again, it felt good. It's the biological signal that once told our ancestors that food kept you alive, that shelter kept you warm, that connection kept you safe. But in the modern world, we've hijacked that system. We've created an entire ecosystem of artificial dopamine triggers, likes, notifications, sugar, porn, gossip, shopping, and we've trained our brains to seek them constantly. But here's the catch: dopamine doesn't guarantee happiness. It just drives behavior. And when dopamine becomes your compass, your life starts heading in the wrong direction. Let's break this down. When you chase pleasure through dopamine, you're not actually pursuing fulfillment. You're pursuing anticipation. That's right, dopamine spikes not when you get the reward, but when you expect it. That's why scrolling endlessly on social media feels addictive, not because every post is amazing, but because maybe the next one will be. It's the same neural loop that drives slot machines: unpredictability, novelty, anticipation. This is what neuroscientists call a dopaminergic loop. But it's not satisfaction you're wired for anymore, it's the hope of satisfaction. And that's why you're tired. That's why you feel empty even after hours of doing things that once felt fun. you're not feeding your soul. You're feeding an algorithm inside your body that never says enough. Now let's contrast that with what really nourishes us. Real joy, deep, sustaining joy doesn't come from spikes. It comes from saturation. It's the kind of feeling that grows slowly, like the warmth of the sun on your face after a storm. It comes from being present, not distracted, from doing meaningful work, not escaping, from loving deeply, not swiping endlessly. And here's the shocking part. Those moments often don't give you a dopamine rush at all. In fact, they might feel boring at first. They might even feel uncomfortable because they ask for your involvement, your full attention, your vulnerability. But we've become so conditioned to chase the quick high that we've lost our tolerance for stillness. We feel anxious when nothing is happening. We check our phones at red lights, in bathrooms, between sentences. We're so overstimulated that silence feels like withdrawal. But silence is not a void, it's a mirror. And most of us are terrified of what we might see when we look into it. Ask yourself this: how often do you do something just to feel a little better, without asking if it actually makes your life better? That cookie, that video, that quick fix, what is it really doing for you? What part of you is it numbing? Because every time we choose the easy pleasure, we reinforce a deeper belief that we can't handle life without it. That discomfort is dangerous. That boredom is unbearable. That pain must be avoided at all costs. And this belief system, this inner programming, is what quietly erodes our mental health over time. Because mental health isn't just about the presence of happiness or the absence of sadness. It's about resilience. It's about your ability to sit with your emotions without needing to escape. It's about your capacity to delay gratification, to choose meaning over momentary relief. And dopamine, when left unchecked, trains you to do the opposite. It trains you to seek the path of least resistance, even when that path takes you further from who you really are. Now here's a question that might shake you. What if the things you do to feel better are actually making you weaker? What if every time you reach for a distraction, you're reinforcing the belief that you can't face life as it is? That you can't face yourself as you are? Because that's the hidden cost of chasing dopamine. It keeps you from developing the inner strength that leads to true freedom. So what's the alternative? It's not to eliminate pleasure. That's not realistic, and it's not even healthy. The goal isn't to become a monk unless that's your path. The goal is to reclaim your relationship with pleasure, to become conscious of it, to ask yourself, moment by moment, is this helping me grow or is it helping me hide? To use dopamine as a tool, not a tyrant. When you stop letting dopamine lead and start leading yourself, something changes. You begin to rediscover the pleasures that don't scream for your attention, the ones that whisper. The calm of a quiet morning, the satisfaction of completing a task, the joy of being fully present with another human being. These experiences don't come with fireworks, but they come with depth. And depth is what we've been starving for all along. The illusion of freedom, how pleasure is quietly enslaving you. We live in an age that worships freedom, the freedom to choose, to express, to indulge. On the surface, it feels like liberation. You can eat what you want, watch what you want, say what you want, swipe left or right on people like they're options in a vending machine. But here's the uncomfortable truth: freedom without self-awareness is just another form of slavery. And when pleasure becomes the thing we chase in the name of freedom, we don't become liberated, we become controlled. not by some tyrant or external force, but by our own desires, our own compulsions, our own inability to say no. Think about it. What is freedom really? Is it the ability to do whatever you want, whenever you want? Or is it the ability to not do something, even when every part of you craves it? True freedom isn't indulgence, it's mastery. It's the kind of power that comes from discipline, not dominance. And yet, we've mistaken compulsive pleasure for personal choice. We scroll for hours and call it self-care. We binge-watch shows until 3 a.m. and call it relaxation. We eat, buy, consume as if it's an act of empowerment when in reality, we're often just trying to silence the inner void. This is where philosophy becomes a mirror. Thinkers like Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and even Buddha warned us centuries ago, the more you are ruled by desire, the less control you have over your life. You may think you're choosing pleasure, but if you can't choose discomfort when it matters, are you really free? When you can't go a day without your favorite vice, be it sugar, screens, social validation, who's really in charge? Let me ask you something that might sting a little. When was the last time you said no to something that felt good? Not because it was wrong, but because you knew it wasn't right for you. When was the last time you delayed gratification, not out of guilt, but out of vision? That's the kind of choice that builds freedom. That's the kind of decision that says, I run my life, not my cravings. But here's the twist. Modern culture doesn't want you to be free. It wants you to be comfortable, because comfortable people are predictable. They don't question, they don't resist, they just consume. The more distracted you are by temporary pleasures, the less likely you are to confront deeper questions. Questions like, who am I becoming? What do I truly value? What am I avoiding by staying busy, entertained, numbed? But these aren't just spiritual questions. They're survival questions. Because if you never ask them, you eventually wake up in a life that feels foreign, hollow, and out of your control. So maybe it's time to stop equating pleasure with freedom. Maybe real liberation is the ability to feel discomfort without running from it, to face boredom without filling it, to sit with your emotions rather than sedate them. Because only when you can be with yourself fully, honestly, without the shield of stimulation, do you start to taste real freedom. Not the freedom to escape reality, but the freedom to engage with it on your own terms. From numb to alive, reclaiming joy through meaning, not stimulation. There's a moment that comes when you've exhausted all the highs. When you've binged, scrolled, indulged, and pacified yourself so many times that even pleasure feels like work. That moment is terrifying. It feels like burnout, like emptiness, like a kind of quiet numbness creeping in behind everything you do. And yet, that moment is sacred, because it's the first honest invitation to wake up, to stop running, to stop feeding the machine of endless stimulation, and to start asking the only question that matters: what if what I've been calling happiness isn't? Joy doesn't come from stimulation, it comes from connection. And not just connection to others, but to yourself, to your values, to the present moment. When you chase pleasure as an end in itself, you separate from those things. You become fragmented, always reaching, never arriving. But when you pause, when you breathe, when you choose to feel rather than distract, something subtle begins to shift. You start noticing things again. The way light falls across a wall, the texture in someone's voice, the sensation of being alive in your body. These moments aren't loud, they don't trend, but they're real. And meaning is what binds it all together. Without meaning, pleasure is hollow. Without meaning, even the best experiences pass through you like vapor. But when you infuse your life with purpose, even the simplest things become radiant. Washing dishes can be a sacred act. A conversation can be transformative. A walk can become a journey inward. Meaning isn't something you find, it's something you give. It's the lens you choose to see through. And once you begin living for meaning, not just for comfort, you begin to feel something wild and ancient stirring inside you, aliveness. Ask yourself this, maybe for the first real time, what would my life look like if I stopped chasing pleasure and started chasing purpose? Not the Instagram version of purpose. Not the hustle, the brand, the hustle culture performance of depth, but the quiet, steady, authentic kind. The kind that asks you to show up as you are, to serve something greater, to grow even when it hurts. That kind of life doesn't always feel good, but it feels true. And that truth is more nourishing than any high. You don't have to renounce pleasure to live meaningfully. You just have to stop letting it be your compass. Let it be the seasoning, not the meal. Learn to love the quiet. Rebuild your attention. Reclaim your mornings. Sit with discomfort long enough to hear what it's trying to teach you. Because beneath your cravings, your habits, your distractions, there's a deeper you waiting. A real you. Not the version addicted to noise, but the one who remembers how to feel joy in stillness. And when you find that version of yourself, when you stop numbing and start living, you'll realize something profound. You were never broken. You were just buried beneath layers of stimulation, of fear, of false freedom. And now you're waking up, slowly, fully, alive.